I have decided that one of the things to do after all the questions I've been getting is to tell you some of the most uh, traumatic things that happened during the war. That it's in my book, but at the same time, I'm extracting just certain sections out of it so I could tell you verbally what I felt during those periods. And today I'm going to talk about the entrance into Germany which was in October of '44, when we entered into Germany through the Siegfried Line. The Siegfried Line, of course, was our major fortifications, and everything in the line. Of course, the Germans already had everything what we call zeroed in. They knew all the ranges. They knew everything. They were covered very well, and their artillery was superb in that area. And of course, that was the entrance into Germany, and they had originally set it up for that reason. We entered into Germany through a town called Paulenberg. And Paulenberg was very interesting to me because it was raining. And so as we're going up the street to move into the Siegfried Line, we were just outside of the Siegfried Line, and they decided that we could take that night and go into some of the buildings and take a break from the rain and all that. And so we went into some of the houses. One of the houses we went into that I put my group into, I didn't notice that you had to climb up the stairs to go in the house. And so that made the basement more or less most of it above ground, which I never noticed. Another stupidity on my part. But anyway, we went in and we all went to the basements right away, of course, in case of artillery. And so I'm in one corner of the basement just resting, and actually by a big barrel, and I didn't pay attention to what it was. And so a shell came in through the wall and exploded on the other end of the room, and it blew the barrel open, and it was sauerkraut, and the sauerkraut just went all over me. And it's really, sauerkraut stinks when it's stuck in a barrel like that. So here I was full of sauerkraut. So the next morning we moved out, and as we moved out, everybody was saying, "Boy, do you smell?" And I said, "Yeah, that's sauerkraut." And of course there was no way to change anything. We were already moving to the front. So as we went into the pillboxes, the first thing we ran into, of course, was the pillboxes themselves that we had to take out. And the method that we used in our area, now all areas may not have done the same thing, but we used what we call flamethrowers. And the British supplied us with flamethrowers, and we didn't know much about them. They had to teach us real quick how to use them. And so we would, another guy and I, we would approach the pillbox as close as we could get to them, and we'd aim the torch of the flamethrower at the slit in the pillbox, and we'd fire it. And we most of the time we were lucky enough to hit the slit where the machine guns were in that. And we would, when it hit the slit, the flame would go into the box and knock all of the air out, and they'd have to get out or suffocate or burn up. So as they come running out, we were able to shoot them. And so that's the main way we took the pillboxes. Of course, after we took the pillboxes, then we're on the other side of them. And the pillboxes, of course, are aimed back into Belgium and the other areas, and they weren't aimed to protect France. I mean, Germany. They were. The job was to fire on the enemy, so the pillboxes were all faced the other direction. So we were behind the pillboxes then. And we would go into the pillboxes, and some of the pillboxes had more than one tier. They would have a tier where they have the ammunition and all that, and then they have another tier where the guys would sleep and that. And some of the pillboxes were more elaborate than others. And but anyway, as we went past the pillboxes, we would set up a line, a defensive line, temporarily before we were to move out, and our tanks would be with us, and the tanks would be deployed, and then we would be deployed. And the problem with that came right away. They found out that the tanks were getting knocked out pretty fast by the German 88s because they were zeroed in that area, and so the tanks had to back down into what they call defilade, which is an area that means that they're the biggest part of them were not exposed. They backed down below the crest. And so the infantry, we would be dug in alongside of them, and in that fashion. I can remember several things about that. Here you got to remember, it's thunder, lightning, artillery shells dropping from both sides. I mean, our artillery going overhead, enemy artillery coming in on us. So it was quite a deal. It just rain, and we was wishing the damn stuff would stop. But anyway, while we're in this position, the lieutenant Woodbury, he was right next to me, and he got hit in the temple. And so when he got hit in the temple, his blood just come rushing out. And the only thing that came to mind was stop the bleeding, because he was really spurting. So I reached down, got a handful of mud, and slapped it on his brain, which stopped the bleeding, and which is what we were after. And then we would take his first aid kit and take the bandage out and wrap it around his head, because we always use the person who was injured his first aid kit. You didn't use your own, because your own was for you, for people when they took care of you would be able to use your first aid kit, not their own, because the one they had was for when they get hit. So anyway, months later, I got a letter from him eventually saying that they said it saved his life, the mud on the brain. And so I told the guys whenever I had a chance, if it's raining and somebody gets hit in the temple, don't take the time to get the first aid kit out, because he could be dead before you even were able to get it open. So use the mud. And so anyway, the lieutenant was gone. I was, of course, the platoon sergeant, so it all became totally my responsibility. And we were, every once in a while, we would get ready to move out to see if we could move out on the enemy, and they would fire on us, and we would have to back up if we couldn't go. And so during the night, while we were stuck there for a few days and lost a lot of tanks. In fact, they said we lost almost 300 tanks in that area of the Siegfried line around Ubach and Galsenkirchen and places like that where we were. Decided one night that we would, they said, send a patrol out. So I took one guy. I always know that Patton says you never push spaghetti, you pull it. So I took the radio operator, and he left the radio there, of course, and he went out together to plant booby traps out in front of the tanks. And so we're putting the stake in the ground and the wire and so forth. So if the enemy would come up towards the tanks, they would hit the tripwires and they'd go off and expose them. So that was the job we were working on. While we're out there, it turned out that later we found out this was a cabbage patch, and was very slippery with the cabbage there. And we heard people out there slipping, and they were cussing in German, so we knew that was a German patrol out there. So I told the guy that was with me, I said, let's just sit there and be real quiet and let them go by before we do anything. So we were real quiet. The enemy went on, and so then after they passed us, I turned to the guy and said, let's go ahead and put some more traps out. He was gone. My helper was gone, so I was out there by myself. So again, stupidity took over. I decided, well, I could plant a few more of these traps and then get back. And so I started to do that, and then I said to myself, what the hell are you doing out here by yourself in no man's land? you know, Patton says never one man by himself. I'm getting out of here. So I decided to get out. Another mistake I made. Instead of going out in the same area going in the same area we came out, which was always the rule. If you go out in the middle of the night, you always return the same area you went out. And so I went directly to go out. And some of the tanks in the defensive position, some of our tanks, heard me out there, and they start firing their machine guns. And so I disrupted the whole front area, screaming ceasefire, ceasefire, and so forth as I approached the tanks. And when I got up there, some of the guys at the tank said, "What the hell are you doing out there?" I said, "Well, didn't they tell you there was somebody out there?" And they said, "No, they didn't tell us." Well, they were supposed to pass the word down toward the front that there's a friendly patrol out there, but they didn't do it. Another mistake, all kinds of mistakes in a war. But anyway, when I got back to my hole, the radio operator, he was really upset, and he apologized for leaving me out there and all that, and I understood, and he'd been through a lot, and so I said, forget it. And while I'm doing that, a guy crawls over from another hole, and he said, so-and-so over there is going crazy. He's batting his head in with his helmet because he's just this artillery fire is driving him nuts. So I said, get in here with the radio operator, and I'll crawl over and get in the hole with the guy that's beating his head in. So I went over there, and I got in a hole with him, and he says, I said, what's the problem? He says, the shells are falling all around me, and he says, I can't take it. And I said, well, I'm right here with you, and the shells are falling around me too. So I told him, I said, just calm down, and when the artillery lets up, and it usually did eventually, I'll take you back to the aid station. So it let up, and I took him back to the aid station. On the way back to the aid station, we got all the way back, and when I got there, they said, what are you doing? And I says, I'm bringing this man back. He's out of it. And they looked at me, and they says, no enlisted man can get combat fatigue, only officers. And I thought that was a big bunch of bull crap you ever heard. And so I told him so, and I said, the man stays right here. I'm not taking him back. So I went back to the company headquarters and told the first sergeant that what I had done. And while I'm talking to him, he says, did you get the replacements I sent up? And I says, when and how many? He says, I sent up 2 of them last night, and I sent them up as replacements. And I says, did you send anybody with them? He says, no, I just directed them where to go. And I says, they're dead. And he says, what do you mean? I said, because a lot of firing went on about that time, and those men, not knowing where they were, wandered right into the enemy lines, and they were killed. And so they're killed in action. And that's another thing. In my book, I never mention the names of people like that, because what a deal it would be for the people back home to read about their sons or husbands or whatever were killed in action because somebody stupidly sent them up there, and they never had the chance, except they walked right into the enemy because no direction. Okay, so then they pulled us out of the line for a day or two and put the 84th in there, who was brand new, in our place while we regrouped some to try to find a way of getting out of the Siegfried line. Because my lieutenant was gone, they sent me back to the battalion headquarters with the company commander, and we're going over the map as to what we might be able to do. And the colonel and I are leaning over the map, and the colonel backs up, and he says, my God, you stink. And I says, yes, sir. He says, what is that? And I says, well, this is sauerkraut on this side and Lieutenant Woodbury's blood on this side. And he says, somebody, for God's sakes, get this man a clean jacket. So they did get me a clean jacket, and so I did get a clean jacket that way. Going back to the where we were bivouac temporarily, they brought the kitchen up, and I noticed that, it looked good. They had they preserve the kitchens, you know. They put them in a safe place, and they very seldom ever fed you because they wanted to protect the kitchens. So anyway, in this case, they brought the kitchen up, and they had a full bunch of these big German knockwurst wieners. Man, they were steaming, and they smelled so good. And we're all in line getting ready to get some of these things. Somebody hollered incoming. And so while the enemy artillery is coming in, everybody run to their holes, except me. I stood there and I looked at those wieners and I said to myself, I'll be damned. I don't care what happens to me, I'm going to get the wieners. So I went to the wieners, had 2 jackets, November, cold, eight pockets, 4 in each jacket, big pockets. So I opened the top jacket and start filling wieners in the inside jacket, and then I closed the jacket and filled the wieners on the outside jacket. So I had 8 big pockets full of wieners. And so they, when they said incoming went beyond us, and so the guys got back in line, and they said, well, where's the wieners? And the mess sergeant says, he got them. I says, yeah, you ran to the holes and I ran to the wieners. And that's one that really gets the kids excited, and it gets them to laugh. And when I go to schools, the teachers that have heard the story before says, don't forget to tell the weenie story. So that was my wiener story. During this time, since I lost the company commander, they sent up a new guy, and he was what they call a 90-day wonder. They didn't teach him much. They didn't have time. In those days, the infantry lost officers regularly. They either run away or got shot or something, and so it leaves a platoon sergeant running the deal. So I'm sitting there with my men, and they get a whiskey ration once a month. We get a whiskey ration. The officers did. So the company commander gave me my officer's whiskey ration because he was gone. And so I'm sitting there with the canteen cups and pouring whiskey for everybody that we had some for. And while we're doing that, this lieutenant comes up, and he has cavalry boots on and pink breeches, all dressed up, you know, and he says, who's in charge here? And I says, I am. And I was sitting down, and he says, stand up. So I figured, well, he's an officer, so I stood up. And he says, I want to have reveille in the morning. And I said, the front line is just a mile away from here, and you want to have reveille? And he said, I said, we don't do that up here. We rest until we get ready for the next battle, so we have rested up some. And so, and I says, and on top of that, take off those damn cavalry boots and those shiny breeches, because you'll be the best target there ever will be in the next action. So he took off, and later on I was told by the company commander, he says, I told him just to do what you said and to join with you guys. So then a couple days later we got into the line and we moved out. And as we were moving out, I had to put Bangalore torpedoes in the wire, and so as I was putting torpedoes in the wire, to set off we set them up a little higher so the blow would blow down, so it would clear the mines so the tanks could get through. So I put the mines in there, the torpedo in there, put the tetral cap in there, and go to the hole to set off the charge. On my way back to the hole, artillery came in and knocked me down, so I was wounded again. And so I was laying there, and Sergeant Carlin came up, and he said, hey, he says, you got hit? And so he gave me a shot of morphine, of my own morphine, of course, because they were not allowed to use theirs, because theirs was for them. And so anyway, I really didn't need it. I didn't think, but he did. And so I gave him my field glasses and the maps and that, and I says, give these to the lieutenant. And he says, I can't give them to the lieutenant. And I says, why can't you? He says, he ran away. I says, what do you mean? He says, when the firing first started, he run. And he says, he's probably still running. He says, I don't know where he went. So I says, okay, then you know you're in charge. And so I'm laying there, and the front comes up, and the front moves on, and the medics come up, and they see me laying there, and this Colonel Sigenwright was his name. He says, what are you doing there when the front's way up there? And I knew him when he was a captain in the States. And I looked at him and I said, you son of a bitch. I said, the front was right here when I got hit. Where were you? And then he started to laugh. And so they carried me forward to an aid station, and then they took me to Valkensburg, Holland. And I'll just say a brief thing about Valkensburg, and then we'll cut this part off and continue from there later. At Valkensburg, the buzz bombs were coming through, and that's the first drones, really. That was a pilotless plane with a fire on the tail. And so that is something that, looking up, we could tell that as long as the fire was in the tail of the plane and you could see it, it was flying. If the fire went out, it's coming down. And that's a bomb then. And so I'm laying in, they got me tied down to a litter, and as they're carrying me towards the warehouse that they turned into a hospital, 2 German prisoners were carrying me, and when the buzz bomb started over, they dropped me in the run and got in a hole and left me sitting there on the pavement looking up and wondering, are these going to come down on me? But anyway, that was interesting. And so when the shelling stopped a while, they come back up, and when they came back up, I looked at the both of them and I cursed them out, and I don't know whether they understood me or not, but I told them if I had a weapon, I'd kill the both of them for letting me lay there like that. So they carried me into the warehouse. Then they decided there's too many buzz bombs coming over Valkensburg. We're going to take you to England. And so I said, I don't need to go to England. I just got a flesh wound, and I could repeat, no, you go to England. So they put me on a plane and sent me to England, and I will cover the deal on that at a next session. But I'll stop here now. I thought it'd be interesting for you to know some of the things verbally of what happened, and we'll cover a few more as time goes on. We may pick up from what happened after Valkensburg on the next session and get you on through that one. But anyway, that's it for now. Take care, God bless, and goodbye.